condemned as inciting the violence we've seen this afternoon. And that now those supporters are refusing to leave the Capitol. The National Guard has been called in, but it's unclear at this point how this will unfold throughout the evening. What is clear is that the United States is in uncharted, dangerous territory. Ellen Morrow, CBC News, Toronto.
Ripple effects across the world. Canada's Minister of Foreign Affairs has tweeted his reaction to the chaos in the U.S. Capitol. Francois-Philippe Champagne writes, Canada is deeply shocked by the situation in Washington, D.C. The peaceful transition of power is fundamental to democracy. It must continue, and it will. We are following developments closely, and our thoughts are with the American people. We'll have continued coverage of what's going on at the Capitol tonight, but we want to bring us back to Windsor, Essex, where the pandemic continues to hit close to home. The death toll rising again today. The health unit saying 17 more people have died of COVID-19. Now, this is the staggering number. 187 people in Windsor, Essex have died of COVID-19 during this pandemic. The number growing exponentially. 107 people have died since December 1st. Space in the morgue is running out. Windsor Regional Hospital now forced to place bodies of those who die inside this trailer, a temporary morgue that can store 36 bodies. That's how many people the health unit says has died since Monday. People are dying in Windsor, Essex at one of the fastest rates in the province. Take a look at the screen there. That's the number of people who have died per 100,000 people. It's adjusted to account for population rates. And when you see it right there, you see the highest is Toronto, second Ottawa, third Windsor, Essex. We've heard people talk about how hard it is watching their loved ones die through a video call. In the process of burying someone during this pandemic, it's also challenging. CBC's Katerina Georgieva joins us now live. Katerina, what exactly are funeral homes dealing with today?
Well, Chris, one funeral director says that it's been soul-crushing, not only because there are so many families in pain right now, but also in having to help them navigate through all the restrictions and all the regulations as they try and sort through their own grief and make sense of their loss. Now, right now, I'm standing right across the street from Windsor Regional Hospital, the Met campus, and right behind me, this funeral home is one of the homes that goes to that campus to help prepare those who have died of COVID-19 for a funeral or a cremation. And the home says that what's happening right now is what it's been preparing for since March. The sign of a different time is clear upon entry. Physical distancing and a reminder not to touch. No hugging, kissing, or shaking hands.
We work around the clock as needed in serving families at any time, day or night.
Since early December, more than 100 people have died of COVID-19. About a quarter of them were taken care of here at Windsor Chapel. Things are busier than normal, but the home has been ready for this since March, with safety precautions in place and is on standby should things get worse.
We're ready to be available, as we always are, 24 hours a day. We have our own crematorium, and that crematorium is prepared, if need be, to function at full capacity 24 hours a day.
The temporary morgue set up outside of Windsor Regional Hospital, a signal that the situation is very serious. With COVID-19 deaths, funeral homes are contacted to pick up the body. There are no delays as a result of the virus, but Lockwood says there are extra precautions. The body bag is sanitized prior to being moved, and then once again upon arrival at the funeral home. Under lockdown, a limit of 10 people per visitation. The top priority is helping the families grieve under exceptional circumstances.
At a time when coming together and gathering and leaning in on support is more important than ever, the death of a loved one, that's being restricted.
At Families First, the manager says the biggest shift during the pandemic is finding ways to best take care of the living.
These poor families have been told no so much. They haven't been able to be around their loved one. They haven't been able to do the things that they want to do before the death occurred, and then they keep getting the no's even after the death.
Genevieve Edwards died of COVID just before Christmas. The regulations await for the family.
You're not allowed to gather. When we do bring her ashes for internment, there'll be 10 of us, if the rules are still in place as they are. And just couldn't gather and hug.
Windsor Chapel says it's making it a priority to give families that are grieving as many opportunities as possible to visit with their loved one and see their loved one before the funeral or cremation. And the home says that one of the ways in which it does that is through the embalming preparation, because that preserves the body, giving family members a bit more time to be able to do that before the funeral, while still allowing the home to follow the regulations of no more than 10 people inside the building. Now, again, the home says it's able to handle the surge right now. It can handle it if it gets even worse, but the priority right now continues to be helping families grieve and giving their loved ones dignified goodbyes. Chris.
Thanks, Katerina. CBC's Katerina Georgieva, live tonight. A union president representing long-term care workers is upset tonight. Upset that an executive with Erie Shores Healthcare got the COVID vaccine before other frontline workers. Arms Boomenleg, Director of Public Relations for Leamington Hospital, posted a photo of himself getting the shot on Twitter. There was also another photo that you're looking at now posted showing that he would get the second dose. Both photos have now been removed. Vaccinations for frontline workers started about 2 weeks ago. Those working and living in long-term care homes have been able to get it for 6 days. Many of the homes are still waiting to get the shot. The union says it's not about the individual, but about the system and how it's been rolled out.
Members are furious. They're saying that we're the ones that are going in there, risking our life, and we're doing it because that's what we love to do and we want to take care of these residents, yet we haven't got that security. And they're frustrated, and they're hoping that this brings light that the need is out there, irregardless who's getting the vaccine, but it should be a pecking order. The pecking order is, just like Ford said today, it should be frontline workers and people working in a long-term care facility. That's where we have the most outbreaks, and that's where we have the biggest problem.
And CBC News reached out to the CEO of Erie Shores Healthcare and Arms Boomenleg, but neither responded immediately. It's not known if other non-frontline staff in the organization received the vaccine. Today was deadline day for elementary students in the public school board. Parents needed to decide if they wanted their kids learning in class or online next week, while COVID-19 rates continue to rise in the region. That deadline's now been extended. And as the CBC's Sanjay Maru reports, all this uncertainty is causing major concern for parents.
This is a really hard situation where I know things are changing day by day, but we can't live our lives.
At-home classrooms like these have become the norm, especially this week, as kids return to school virtually from their winter break. The mother of these young children had to put these workspaces together last minute. Now, she's waiting and waiting to find out when her kids can return to school.
We can't stay organized and make plans for the future if we don't know what's going on now. If they give me a date, I can possibly put something in place so I can have somebody with my children, perhaps at some point, so that I can go out to work to earn a living.
The public board in Windsor-Essex announced today it's extending the deadline for elementary students to change learning models after some parents called it an impossible decision with little clarity from the province and the health unit. The province says it may announce tomorrow if elementary students doing in-school learning will stay at home beyond January 11th. Meanwhile, the health unit says it will announce its local recommendations tomorrow morning.
Schools should be very near to the top of the list of things we want to keep open. But we do have to recognize that if we do that, then that's very likely going to contribute to the rising transmission that we're seeing.
Susie says there are trade-offs to consider as parents take time off work to care for young children learning at home. But as the weather gets colder, helping viruses spread more easily, it may be more justified now to keep schools closed than ever before. When elementary students went back to school on September 10th, the health unit reported more than 2,500 total cases for the region. Today, that number has risen to more than 8,800.
Preventing the reopening of schools a little bit longer, especially coming off the tail of that holiday season, would probably be a wise decision in terms of the uncertainty that we're facing right now.
For me, I don't like online learning, but I do not think that my children would be safe at school. So I'm hoping that they extend it for a period of time, but that there is an end to that.
Zavit says not knowing when the school closure will come to an end has left her feeling confused as she mulls over the pros and cons of putting her kids back in the classroom. Meanwhile, in a letter sent to parents just days ago, the province is standing firm on its position that schools are not a source of rising community transmission. Sanjay Maru, CBC News, Windsor.
Now, this has been the longest stretch of the pandemic without a news conference from Premier Doug Ford, but that ended this afternoon. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley with the details.
How you doing, everyone? For his first news briefing in more than 2 weeks, the Premier is at Pearson Airport, announcing a voluntary COVID-19 testing program for arriving international travelers. Plenty has happened since December 22nd, when Doug Ford last held a news conference. COVID cases in Ontario are now surging past 3,000 a day. Hospitals have a record number of coronavirus patients, and each week, hundreds are dying. So there are a lot of pent-up questions for the Premier, including, why is it taking so long to vaccinate all long-term care residents?
So we aren't delaying. As soon as we have it, we're going to have people vaccinated.
Although provincial officials say they expect to get 80,000 doses of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine every week this month, Ford insists it's not coming quickly enough.
We will run out of the Pfizer vaccine by today or tomorrow at the latest.
Parents want to know, will elementary students be going back to class next Monday?
We're going to talk to the health table and the chief medical officer and get their advice. That's the expertise that we're going to take. And we're going to take that advice, and we'll be announcing that in the next day or so.
And in the wake of Finance Minister Rod Phillips's resignation, Ford was asked twice, did any other Conservative MPPs or his staff travel over the holidays?
I made it very clear to everyone not to travel, and I made it very clear to our caucus and cabinet members about traveling.
After the news conference, a spokesperson for the Premier's office issued a statement saying they are not aware of any other Conservative MPPs or staff who traveled outside of Canada. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Windsor West MP Brian Massey wants the federal government to implement a rapid COVID-19 testing pilot program at the Windsor border crossings.
And so the men and women that serve us on the border need to have appropriate rapid testing to ensure that if they want to have that done, they can do so to return home at the end of the day to feel more confident and secure about the exposures at the workplace.
He's suggesting the government can use some of the 20 million rapid tests it already has. The results are available in a matter of minutes. He says not everyone would be tested. Frequent travelers could sign up for a voluntary program. The program would be available to CBSA border staff as well. The president of the local Customs and Immigration Union supports the idea.
There's a lot of anxiety and fear in the workplace about what we face, particularly with the asymptomatic people every day. And it's a workforce under stress, no doubt about it.
Turner also wants the government to get the vaccine out to border staff more quickly. Now, Massey says the pilot project could be modeled after a similar one in Alberta. He says it could be rolled out in a matter of days. CBC reached out to the Minister of Public Safety for comment. We did not hear back. Some health workers in Windsor, Essex are holding off on getting the COVID-19 vaccine despite being a priority group. 21% of those who are working in that area are expressing reluctance, and that's raising questions about whether the shots should be mandatory for certain workplaces. But an expert in caring for the elderly says that we should be understanding of the hesitancy.
And that doesn't mean they're anti-vaccine. They're just a bit worried, because I think a lot of people genuinely are saying, wait a minute, like, we've never had a vaccine developed that quickly in a global pandemic. For example, is it safe? I don't want to be the first one. It's kind of how we, it's kind of, this is human nature and human instinct. So these are natural thoughts. I'm actually quite pleased to hear that 80% of people want to actually get vaccinated.
Meanwhile, an employment lawyer says when it comes to the law, it could get more difficult for workers. He says employers could make immunizations mandatory. And when it comes to working with vulnerable populations, it may come to that.
That employees who are working with vulnerable people like long-term care homes or even hospitals have to take the vaccine if the employer orders it. And I think every employer in that situation should order it, and it might even be viewed as negligent by a court if they don't order it now that a vaccine's in place. So if an employee refuses to take a vaccine because they're an anti-vaxxer or they're concerned about side effects, I think they've just willed themselves out of a job right now.
He says the only legitimate grounds to refuse the shot will be based on a medical issue or religious exemption. But a union that represents staff at long-term care homes says not so fast. Its president says mandatory vaccinations would fail, and the government needs to address concerns among workers. Another live look here at the situation in Washington, where protesters stormed the Capitol building. The Associated Press is reporting that a woman who was shot inside the U.S. Capitol during violent pro-Trump protests has died. Now, the American Capitol is now secure, according to reports. There is a curfew in place. Congress was sitting in the Capitol when violent protesters had rushed. Lawmakers were expected to certify Joe Biden's victory in the presidential election. A live look here at the city of Detroit tonight. We will have the weather with Colette Kennedy up next. This is another live look at the protests in front of the Capitol building in Washington tonight. Earlier today, supporters of President Donald Trump pushed past barricades, forcing themselves inside of the U.S. Capitol, something that hasn't been done since 1812. What you're looking at here now is a live shot as police push back. The National Guard has been called in. The Associated Press reporting today that a woman who was shot in the Capitol during this violent protest has died. Colette Kennedy now joining us with the weather. What do we got? The sun was one of the things we were promised. Is it still something that might come out?
Yeah, it came out, just not over top of us. You know, yeah, gloomy skies prevailing kind of goes along with the mood. And there were breaks, I have to tell you, but they were just a little bit further east. So that cloud deck, it's going to erode. But, you know, here in southwestern Ontario, going to be about one of the last areas to finally break out of it. I'm sorry to say that. A few scattered flurries possible as well, even into tomorrow. There won't be much of that. Some cooler nights coming, daytimes too, just a few of them, but you'll notice it more at night when you get up in the morning, some cooler air that'll be in place. And for that sunshine, yeah, we're going to have better luck as we get towards Friday than we'll see on Thursday. It's going to be almost a split decision through the region in terms of who will see sun and who will not. The current temperature is still on the mild side for this time of year. A few of those scattered flurries mostly to the north and across the lake, but I do want to show you, see on the satellite across the lake, some erosion to the cloud deck there. Yeah, we don't want it there. We want it over top of southwestern Ontario, but this is what we have. So some of those isolated flurries for tonight, and just look at that cloud line, right? So clearing to the east, additional clearing, it's still holding in here. We can't seem to get it out of the southern part of the province, but we will begin to see that more so as we go into Thursday. We may even get later in the day Thursday some breaks a bit earlier, and eventually it's going to clear right out. Unfortunately, did you see the timing there? Like around 3, 4 o'clock, sun will be setting. So that's why I say really better luck into Friday, when we'll be able to have more sunshine and pull the sunglasses back out again wherever you probably have to start looking for them. You may not remember, it's been a while where you put them. Here's a look at our overnight temperatures. So -2. We'll have very little in terms of a wind chill because the winds through the overnight hours are going to be somewhat light and variable. They'll pick up a little more tomorrow, but we should get above the freezing mark up to 1 degree. May do a little bit better as the day wears on in terms of carving out some sun. Into Friday, looks pretty good in terms of sky conditions, but I did mention the colder air coming in at night. So I just want you to take note of those, because obviously we're reaching those lows around 7 or so in the morning. So if you're an early riser, you're really feeling it then at the beginning part of the day, Chris.
The beginning is actually the end part of the day. I keep asking about sun because of those glorious sunsets that we have for a stretch in December. Just miss them, that's all.
They'll be back. Don't you worry, my friend.
That's perfect. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
We take you live once again back to Washington as we continue to follow the developments after a day of protests starting this afternoon. U.S. President Donald Trump urging his supporters to not let them silence your voices before the protest. Shortly after the Capitol building was stormed, he released a video on Twitter repeating false statements about the election being stolen and told protesters to go home now. Vice President Mike Pence also tweeting, saying, quote, "This attack on our Capitol will not be tolerated. Those involved will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." We'll have an eye on this. We'll bring you the latest after the break. Another live look here at the Washington Capitol. You can see protesters, barricades placed up, flags raised. This after a day of protests where a mob of supporters for President Trump took to the steps of the Capitol and breached the Capitol this afternoon as lawmakers were inside preparing to certify Joe Biden's election results from the November presidential election. We've been following the story closely. The Prime Minister today also addressing this, responding to the violence in Washington. He tweeted, "Canadians are deeply disturbed and saddened by the attack on democracy in the United States, our closest ally and neighbor. Violence will never succeed in overruling the will of the people. Democracy in the U.S. must be upheld, and it will be." Now that's it for CBC Windsor News, but we are following this story closely. CBC News Network will continue on these developments in Washington. And for more local news, you can go to our website, cbc.ca/Windsor. Thanks for watching.